This video is sponsored by Honey, a tool to save money during checkout and available for many of your favorite websites. It may or may not surprise you to hear that The Simpsons has a long history of death. Throughout the animated show's 32 seasons, many people have died in various brutal ways. But which of these deaths were truly the most gruesome? That's what we're looking at today. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is The Simpsons Deaths, Gruesome to Most Gruesome. We do have a few small rules to start with. Simply put, this list will not include any Treehouse of Horror death because we want to stick to the mainline show. That said, let us know in the comments section if we should cover the deaths in the Treehouse of Horrors in a future episode. Secondly, while this list does not include Treehouse of Horrors, it will include deaths from other non-canon sources like I, Columbus. Finally, we're not including deaths that fully happen off-screen. We need to see some of the action. With all that said, let's get started. The first section on our list is the heart attacks. Characters who died because their heart quit out on them. At the very bottom of our list is Cornelius Chapman. Cornelius was the oldest man in Springfield who was going to gain an award for being the oldest man. When he went to accept the award, he got kissed on the cheek by pop sensation Britney Spears. This kiss must have set something off because his heart stopped and he died live on stage, handing the award off to Monty Burns.
Don't give me that kiss of death, you Black Widow!
Moving on to second from the bottom, we have Max, the ice cream man. He's the ice cream man that Homer chased after. When Homer pays for his ice cream, he pays with a $100 bill. After paying with the $100 bill, Max suffers a fatal heart attack trying to hand Homer change. He falls below Cornelius because, firstly, he was not the oldest man in Springfield. He also falls next because he died doing menial labor and not after being kissed on the cheek by a pop icon. Rolling into our next spot is Albert, the leader of the overweight activist group. Albert was a 23-year-old overweight man confined to a mobility scooter. He tries to stand up from his scooter, to which he succeeds. However, after standing up, he died of a massive heart attack and was then cremated. Albert is the youngest of our characters to die from a heart attack and lands here because of the circumstances that led to it.
People, for God's sake, join a gym!
His lifestyle led to his death, and he might have been fine if he just went to the gym. Our final character to die from a heart attack is fan favorite Fat Tony. Fat Tony was a mobster who appeared quite often throughout the show and was one of the most recognizable secondary characters. The episode he dies in is Donnie Fatso, where Homer goes undercover in his gang as a plant by the FBI. Tony dies of cardiac arrest from a mix of overeating and the stress of being betrayed by Homer, dying in his arms. Tony lands as the most gruesome in this section because, unlike the others, his death was caused by betrayal, mostly. The next section on our list is poison lovers, people who died because of poison, whether that be food poisoning or cyanide. The poison section starts with Red Barclay. Red was a trucker who had a contest with Homer to see who could eat the sirloin a lot, a 16-pound steak. Red not only finishes the steak and keeps his title, but he is only the second person to complete this massive challenge. However, after successfully eating the steak, Dr. Hibbert declares him dead of beef poisoning.
Looks to me like beef poisoning.
But hey, at least he died doing what he loved, eating, which is okay, right? Next up is Frankie, the health inspector. He was a good friend of Moe who fudged his reports of his friend's tavern.
Lenny, you don't have to hide that rat.
Frankie suddenly dies after ingesting one of Moe's famous pickled eggs, so we assume this means food poisoning. Frankie ranks below Red because he died from rotten food, instead of eating too much of a good thing, like the trucker who ranks above him. Stepping into our next spot is Emperor Burns' Taster from I, Columbus. Emperor Burns' Taster, who we will just refer to as Smithers, was exactly what his name implies. Smithers was the personal taster for Emperor Burns and tasted each of his meals and drinks for poison. Smithers' job means he was always in harm's way, and he ingested a poison placed by Majora. The poison seemed to be pretty bad as well, since he choked to death before falling over and activated almost immediately. Because this was his job though, he ranks lower than the following poisonings. The first group death on the list, the Calabrese gang, is up next. The Calabrese gang was the rival gang to Fat Tony and called Tony and his gang weak because Michael wanted to get into cooking. The gang dies when Michael invites them to dinner and poisons all of their food under the pretense that they would get all of Fat Tony's territories. Although their poison doesn't seem as potent as the previous, they weren't hired to test food for poison.
I won't be using this recipe anymore.
Finally, in this category, we have the second I Carambas poisoning death, Majora. Majora was the wife of Obesus and the daughter of an arena owner. She vied for power, causing the deaths of 2 previous emperors and putting her son, Bartigula, in charge. Much like the taster she had poisoned years prior, commits suicide by ingesting an unknown poisonous substance after Obesus and Bartigula kill each other. It might be the same poison that she gave Smithers, but it can't be said. She ranks here because she wasn't secretly poisoned, but took it herself to take her own life, which definitely makes things a lot darker. We were gonna call this next category the Fallers, like usual, but there is only one death in this category, so let's go ahead and call it something different. Death by Tshirt Gun. As I mentioned, there's only one falling-based death we caught in The Simpsons, but it's one of the most iconic, the demise of Maud Flanders. But first, today's video is sponsored by Honey. Honey is an online shopping tool that helps you save money by automatically searching for promo codes to apply to your cart when you're checking out. And the best part is, it's totally free. I've actually been using Honey for a couple years and I've lost track of how much money I've saved. Say you're on one of your favorite websites, when you check out, a little box will drop down and automatically find promo codes available for whatever you're trying to buy. We all buy a lot of stuff online, and if Honey can automatically save you money at checkout, that's a massive win. Like I said, Honey only takes a few seconds to find you promo codes. It works on lots of your favorite websites, and it finds an average discount of 18%. Honey has saved me a ton of money when buying parts for my PC, as well as video and audio equipment, including my drone. Don't pass up the chance to keep more money in your pocket. Go to joinhoney.com/wickedbinge and install today. Thank you, Honey, for sponsoring us. Now, let's get back to the video. Maud was the recurring wife of next-door neighborino Ned Flanders, who was killed due to problems with her voice actress. During a day out at the Springfield Speedway, t-shirts were being fired from cannons into the stands and Homer really wanted one. Homer bent over at the last moment to pick up a bobby pin, and Maud is hit by a bundled-up t-shirt. This causes her to trip backwards and fall over the edge, supposedly dying on impact and not having any quick resuscitation. Once again, thanks to Homer.
Oh my lord, she's dead!
When people mention deaths from The Simpsons, this is usually the one that comes to mind, because it's iconic and also very darkly comedic. The next category is probably pretty recognizable to Simpsons fans. Strangled out. People who died via asphyxiation from another person's hands. This is another single death category, and the honor of this death goes to Bartigula, the jerk. He was the emperor of Rome put in place by his mother Majora, and was the cause of plenty of death thanks to his war on the sea god Neptune. Bartigula went crazy with power and called himself a god.
I am now your god!
When his father made fun of him, he got bloodthirsty and went to fight his dad. During this fight, Obesus managed to strangle him to death, cutting off any airflow and killing him by asphyxiation. It makes sense that a version of Bart would eventually go out this way. This next category is similar to strangulation. This section is called drowned out. People who died from drowning in a lot of liquid, usually water. Starting off our drowning category is Professor Huntington. Huntington was a professor at Swigmore University, and Moe's former professor who helped him get back into bartending. It is revealed that he has cancer, and after helping Moe get his groove back, he walks into the lake. He commits suicide by drowning in a very cinematic way, which is still a pretty bad way to go out. The other sad drowning death is the recognizable band Green Day, who die in the Simpsons movie. Green Day is a punk rock band that is led by lead singer Billy Joe Armstrong, who was playing a concert in Springfield. The group was playing on a barge on Lake Springfield, which started to eat away at it. After the lake ate through their barge, it flipped over and the 3 band members fell into the water and drowned.
Gentlemen, It's been an honor playing with you tonight.
Their deaths are reminiscent of the tale of the band aboard the Titanic who continued to play as the boat sank. They have to rank lower than Professor Huntington because they didn't drown on their own volition, unlike him. This next section is called the non-romantic crushes, people being crushed by something usually larger than themselves. To start out, we have the Panicky Man from the Simpsons movie. The Panicky Man appears as the dome is slowly descended upon the town of Springfield, trying to decide between staying in Springfield or going free. He jumps between the two places, but is eventually crushed by the dome and killed when he can't decide.
I never saw Venice.
Indecision can truly be a fatal mistake, as he easily shows us. Moving on to Emperor Burns from I, Columbus. Emperor Burns was the political son of the previous emperor and had him killed, causing his ascent to the throne. He had at least one attempt on his life from Majora, which caused the poisoning of his taster, Smithers. While Smithers was dying from the poison he had ingested, he knocked over a pillar which fell over and crushed the emperor. It can be assumed he died from being crushed by the pillar, but the reason he ranks below the Panicky Man is what happens afterwards. When he is crushed, he somehow coughs up his brain, and it falls down the stairs in front of a lion, who eats it. This brain expulsion is what really takes the cake for Emperor Burns, and places him just above Panicky Man. But now we get into our final category, the cruelest deaths, filled with plenty of intriguing ways to die. These ones are quite gruesome. The least gruesome death in this category goes to Emperor Quimby from I, Columbus. Quimby denied Obesus's plea to be a senator, and angry from this situation, he is manipulated by soon-to-be Emperor Burns to kill Quimby. So Obesus snuck into his private vomitorium and stabbed him repeatedly, leaving him to bleed out on the ground. While his death is a reference to the murder of Julius Caesar, it was mostly due to bleeding, which makes it the weakest one in the category.
History rules!
Following the emperor with his murderer, we have the death of Obesus. He was a slave gladiator back in ancient Rome who was eventually freed and became a clothes washer. His wife, Majora, utilized him to gain power, moving up by murdering the emperor. Well, after his son, Bartigula, became Emperor of Rome, the two of them fight over Bartigula calling himself a god. Well, even though he manages to kill him via strangulation, he was stabbed in the throat by his son. This stabbing takes a moment to kill him, which leaves him in intense agony before his death, which places him slightly higher than Quimby. While stabbing is pretty bad, Carl Alfalfa Switzer died in a very disturbing way. He plays the original Alfalfa for the Little Rascals alongside Moe, who played Stinky. Carl stole Moe's bit by looking into a tailpipe and getting soot all over his face. This caused Moe to tackle him down and beat him to death in front of everyone. The reason this ranks lower than Obesus is that this style of beating is much more personal than the neck stab. Moe got lucky that Carl was an orphan owned by the studio, and he didn't get in any legal trouble for it. Following up is the next group on our list, the Calabresi's Goons. This was a group of mobsters who worked for the Calabrese gang and against Fat Tony's gang. They died because of a car bomb that was planted, incinerating them, which is a terrible way to go. But in our opinion, Frank Grimes' death outclasses the previous group pretty handily. Grimes was the character with the most excruciating backstory in the history of The Simpsons. He was eventually hired by Springfield Nuclear Power Plant and got to meet Homer, someone who didn't work hard to get where he is. He tries his best to humiliate Homer, but everything he did has failed.
I'm a worthless employee, just like Homer Simpson.
By the end of the episode, he had gone crazy with all the stuff Homer had accomplished and started acting like Homer. This causes him to grab exposed power lines without wearing gloves, causing him to be electrocuted to death. This death is not only gruesome, but also iconic for how shocking it was. Pun very much intended. Moving on to someone who knows what he is, Exploding Headman ranks next. The Exploding Headman is a very simple character. He is a man whose head exploded due to the loud, low note from the THX intro. This man's death ranks below Frank Grimes because his whole head explodes, and while it's not bloody, it's still kind of terrifying. Following is another simple character, the Sideshow Bob Gladiator from I, Columbus. This gladiator appears during a montage of other gladiators that Obesus fought against and killed. However, this gladiator is really the only one to fully die on screen during their montage. During his fight, Obesus utilized the gladiator's sword stuck in his shield and sliced upwards, which split him in half. This is very obviously a pretty gruesome way to go. The next death may surprise some. It's Victor. Victor was the Ukrainian mob boss who was hunting down Homer's new friend, Wayne Slater, for accidentally killing his wife. He kidnapped Homer to bring Wayne to him so that he could kill him and get his revenge on him.
What will you guys use when there aren't newspapers anymore?
However, Wayne throws a shard of glass into his throat, causing him to choke to death on his own blood and the glass shard, which is a pretty long and painful way to go. Speaking of long, painful deaths, next up is Wolfus Rain from I, Cruelest. Rain was the first gladiator that Obesus fought after he was sold into slavery by his father. Obesus was put into the ring as a sacrifice to show off the intense strength of this powerful gladiator, and was expected full well to be destroyed. Well, he didn't let this happen, knocking him down, dragging Wolfus across the ground, and grinding his face down to the skull, leaving him without a face and a trail of blood behind him. Our silver medal may not go to the most painful, but it definitely makes us cringe thinking about it. Sherry Bobbins is next. She is a caricature of Mary Poppins from the book and film series. Sherry was a nanny for the Simpsons family to help Homer and Marge deal with the children due to Marge losing her hair from stress. After a long line of songs and other helpful actions that were a lot of fun for the Simpsons children, she has to leave.
I believe my work here is done.
Well, when she starts to leave, she flies away using her magic umbrella, and it seems like she may be back in the future. However, in the background as the family is chatting, she flies away and gets sucked into a jet engine. Now, we don't see any blood, unlike some of the previous entrants on the list, but the thought of being sucked into a jet engine makes up for it, which is why she gets our silver medal of gruesomeness. Finally, the gold medal for most gruesome death in the series, in our opinion, may not be the most bloody, but it is definitely the most terrifying to think about. The most gruesome death goes to the Roman Senate from I, Cruelest. The Roman Senate is made up of a variety of popular secondary characters from The Simpsons. Among the list of senators, we have Krusty the Clown, Dr. Hibbert, Superintendent Chalmers, and Sideshow Mel. When Bartigula became emperor and he started losing his war, he asked his soldiers to dissolve the Senate. Well, he dissolved the Senate all right. He had his soldiers dump over a vat of acid onto them, killing everyone except for his father, who wasn't there at the time. This acid dissolves them physically, leaving some as skeletal remains and some as goo instead. So these are by far the worst deaths, even though they aren't particularly bloody. But what do you think? Which Simpsons death is truly the most gruesome? Let us know in the comments section below. Make sure to hit that notification bell and binge our other gruesome to most gruesome videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.